Hey, this is Ant from Your Property Network, and today we're catching up with an old friend of YPN's. So, someone that we featured in the magazine maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, and he was in a spotlight piece we did then of young up and coming property investors, property developers. And so it felt like a great time to catch back up and see what life is now like 4 or 5 years on with Scott Williams. So, Scott, welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me again. It's been about 4 years, I think, so looking forward to catching up for sure.
So let's just do a recap. So when we were talking to you 4 years ago, what were you up to then? What was the focus then?
Yeah, so we were mostly investing in HMO deals as a buy and hold strategy, and then we were using the flip model with JV partners to sort of build capital to keep investing for sort of long term. And also at the time, we had a letting agency, and we just recently, I think, launched the finance business and acquired a mortgage brokerage and brought another director into the business. So that was kind of, I think, where we were we're at the early stages of that finance business and then still investing in the property stuff.
Okay, fab. And now winding the clock on, now you're fellow podcaster, you are founder of the Property Developer Show. So tell me what life looks like now. And then we're going to talk through how investing has changed and some of the challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So I ended up sort of growing that finance brokerage and selling to business partners at sort of the end of 23, get my dates right. It all merges into one after COVID. And then no sort of, it was just a sort of directional thing. And I just wanted to sort of change which direction I was going in with the finance brokerage. So the guys bought me out, all done sort of amicably. And then we ended up offloading before that the letting agency to another director that took that business on and sort of continue to focus on the flipping projects. We bought a sort of project sort of post COVID, and which we'll go into detail today, and then sort of stumbled upon the show as just a bit of a 2020. I try again get my dates right. 2023 2024, I was just sort of trying different ideas and then landed on doing the show. And the momentum has just been amazing. There was obviously a massive need for it within the industry. And that sort of led me on to launching the podcast as part of the show. And then ended up buying a couple of deals and trading a few deals within that sort of time period, just sort of not really trying too hard to source deals. It's just kind of been the hard work that I did, years ago when I was looking for deals constantly that stuff sort of came along and that's sort of kept me ticking over on keeping my hand in the property sort of space. But it's been a difficult time, I think, for most people in the sector that have been well established for a long time. And I've sort of felt the effects of that, particularly trying to sell. That's the key thing in the difficulty, really. And yeah, that sort of kept me busy. And now we're here, obviously. Show's well established and still looking at property deals alongside that as well.
Okay, brilliant. And I really appreciate the kind you being so candid as well, saying that actually right now, trading property for profit, buying, selling, buying, adding value, selling, flipping properties, and even small scale developments can be a challenging time right now. So we're
Absolutely.
gonna talk about why that is, what the differences are, and some of the kind of creative strategies that you've brought in to find maybe better ways of doing deals, quicker ways of doing deals. So you mentioned that kind of odd period post COVID. Yeah. So where kind of during it, we didn't really know what was going on with property prices, did we? It was really, really weird. And then immediately afterwards, the world kind of opened up and property seemed to go crazy.
Absolutely. So I remember messaging a estate agent I had a really good relationship with, sort of as we were kind of going into that first lockdown and sort of saying, surely you've got some deals on the table. And the message I got back was like, look, you really don't understand what's happening here. We are selling stuff before it even gets to the market for top dollar. It's just everything is moving so quickly. And that stumbled us a bit and we kind of, which is why we started looking at the finance stuff. And yeah, I mean, I can go into detail with the deal we sort of did post sort of lockdown if that's good.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah.
Sure. So just sort of really hit a sweet spot with the sort of timing of this deal. We battened down the hatches in a small way, but because we didn't really know what the market was going to do. And we were viewing this property on the basis of maybe sourcing it. And my business partner actually went to view it and sort of was like, look, we need to buy this because we can turn it from a 2-bed into a 3-bed and move the bathroom downstairs. So we offered 55,000 for, I think, off the top of my head, for this property, and I think we were one of 2 offers. Usually, this is a bit of a nugget for people making offers. Usually, when I comprise an offer, I'll give bank statements. I'll give, if you're getting bridging finance, I'll give an offer in principle. I'll give all my ID. I'll give everything that the estate agent needs to basically secure the offer. And it just, when you're doing best and finals, which is what this scenario was, it just adds a bit of clout to the offer and just shows that you know what you're doing. You've done this before. You're not going to mess around, that type of thing. So we ended up, I think, matching someone else's offer, but because we'd put all the other, additional information in front of the vendor, we got the deal. And it was kind of, again, when stuff was really happening in the market and a lot of activity then just began, everything just went crazy and people were buying stuff way above sort of what, it was worth in a way. We originally were going to refinance the property and hold it as a buy to let, but we're about 95% into the project and we thought, you know what, we'll just put it on the market at a ridiculous price. And if it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, then, no harm done. So we put it on for 120 and that then went to best and final and we got 125. That was in probably, I think we managed to refurb it within 3 to 4 months, but the sale was held up because it was that time when land registry couldn't keep up with the amount of transactions that were happening. So there was a massive delay on registering the new ownership on the title that we were meant to be on. So we had to wait to obviously appear on the title on land registry in order for us to actually prove ownership to sell the property. So that was basically what held that deal up. And I think we ended up sort of buying it in February, turning it into a 3-bed, moving the bathroom downstairs, and then ended up selling it, I think November, December time in the same year. Sometimes, you create your own luck. And that was just one of those deals that was just incredibly lucky, really great timing. And I think that is the nature of this game. Sometimes you're really lucky. And then obviously, as we're going to come on to over the last couple of years, I've just been unlucky with that sort of balance of the edge of deals not going the way that they were planned to go. And that's just the nature of investing, really.
So, I mean, that's a great deal, a little bit held up by land reg, but, actually easy in, easy out, quick turnaround of cash, nice profit. How are things different now? What do you think the difference is? Because in essence, you're still looking at you have been still looking at similar kinds of deals, just kind of quick refurb and then sell on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I ended up buying a bungalow sort of June last year, and I thought great area, great location, brilliant for kind of the older demographic. It's an estate that has a lot of bungalow sort of within that area. So I thought this would be a quick project, probably work the margins on a thinner basis, on the basis that I thought, you know what, I can do a really quick job on this and make it nice and get it offloaded. And did that relatively quick, turned it around in sort of 3 months, got it on the market. Timing for the market wasn't particularly good, sort of coming the back end Q4, which is typically slower anyway, November, Christmas, and then it kicks off again in January, as most people will know. So the timing was relatively off with that, but I ended up selling it within sort of 2 weeks and sold for asking price, which was 215,000, and, all moving forwards. We probably got 3 weeks into that process and the buyers just pulled out, no sort of reason given. So then it was, okay, back to the drawing board, price reduction we hadn't done a price reduction then, but we'd lost that kind of early momentum of it being sort of, relatively high on the portals. So then I think we did a price reduction, managed to sell it for 210 again. And then again, probably 4 or 5 weeks later, chain collapsed. The buyer that was buying mine had their buyer had a survey done and something had appeared. And obviously that all collapsed. So then had to do another price reduction. down to 205, offers over, managed to get it secured, and fingers crossed, today's the 29th of July, and we've just had completion date for hopefully the 12th of August. So fingers crossed for that project. Now I'm in a position where I'll be lucky if we do complete on the 12th of August, I'll maybe make a couple of grand off that. You know, it's one of them deals that's been eroded because of the debt that I've got on the property. Obviously, all the overheads with council tax, with bills, with, you know, everything else that comes with maintaining an empty house. Insurance is higher. So yeah, that's been one of those deals where it's not gone to plan. But the mitigation of that is I'm not going to lose any money. Thankfully, in this case, I might have done slightly, lost a bit of money, but I think it's finding that balance with, you know, it's a numbers game in any regard, property. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. And sometimes it's just you need to win more than you lose. And that's the objective. And fortunately, over the period that I've been investing, I've done that.
And these kind of bungalow flips, we featured quite a few of them over the years because they can make amazing projects because you're essentially taking what is quite often a very tired, run down, older couple or older person's been living in there and then repackaging, repurposing that for a kind of people who are buying without finance. Perhaps they sold the family home, looking for a kind of finished product, happy sometimes to pay a price premium to do so, don't necessarily want to take on their work. So it's got all the recipes, all the ingredients, rather, for a great flip. And it sounds like this would have been exactly that, but you've been the victim of kind of the wider circumstances of what's going on in the property market. So to have
Absolutely.
the kind of chain collapse or buyers to pull out like that, we've been there as well. You know, we've lost buyers. We thought we've had buyers. They've lost their, you know, their buyers, the chains collapsed further down, and you're just in this really difficult situation of saying, well, I'd love to sell to you, but you're not proceedable at the moment. You know, you're not in a position to move. And so we all know that selling properties in the UK is the biggest pain in the ass. Nobody loves the process. It takes forever. I don't really know why. So from your experience then, what is the difference in the market? Are we just seeing a lot more kind of buyers or more chains collapsing? What's actually happening?
I think there's a multitude of things in my opinion, and I think it's sort of driven by the fact that I think more people are saving than ever before. More people are afraid to move or take actionable things outside of the comfort of what they've got currently. And I think as well, what's that sort of creates in the market is this kind of sort of gap between where price expectations are for premium stock and where people are willing to pay for less premium stock. And I think during, you know, good economic times where people have maybe got a better budget or they've got a bigger deposit or they can afford a higher mortgage, they're willing to pay more money for the premium stock because they know they can move in. But in times like this, people are probably more receptive to buying a doer-upper and having a bit of a house project where they can save a bit of money on their mortgage, but then they can put, you know, they can put new carpets in and decorate the house a little bit. What's essentially in that scenario, what I believe has been created is this finer gap between what people are willing to pay. So as a developer, when I'm pricing something to sell at a premium price, I have to make a certain amount of margin, but there's less of that stock available because that's, I think, what the general market are looking to buy. So they're willing to pay slightly more than what you are willing to pay as a developer. But then on the upper end of the market where you've got the premium stock, people aren't necessarily paying the top dollar for that because A, they've got more option available in the market, and B, because they just simply can't afford that mortgage and where that mortgage is at the moment due to obviously interest rates being where they are. I also think that also playing into that is that there's less people that are upsizing and there's more people that are downsizing. So I unfortunately sit in that sort of market where it's very competitive. It's easy, sort of easier to access for first time buyers or sort of, you know, downsizers or house movers that are maybe looking for an extra bedroom here and there. And again, it's just, I don't think there's enough sort of going upwards to release that kind of middle stock to kind of developers like myself that, again, will buy it, add the value, sell it at premium because it's essentially a brand new home. And I think also partnered with that is this sort of there's a lot happening, but there's nothing really happening all at the same time. There's a lot of sort of paper pushing and solicitors dragging their heels, lenders dragging their heels, and people still probably blaming COVID that they're trying to catch up with themselves. But and it's the actionable stuff that keeps things moving forwards, and that in property when times are as they are, it makes it even more difficult to get stuff across the road, across the line, because there's just a huge delay in the projects that should have completed 3 months ago. You're in the back of the line today for that. So you're already 3 months behind. And I think that's just compounded massively since that sort of post-COVID boom that we saw. I think solicitors have just got and other professionals, not just solicitors, have got so used to these unrealistic timeframes that it's almost like a bit of a culture shock that we need to be like, right, we need some process change or we need more actionable stuff to happen in the market. And I think it's just a mixture of all this sort of stuff, stagnation and interest rates being where they are, that's just made it a really difficult market to operate in, particularly when you're buying and selling property, for sure.
I mean, it's without a doubt, it's a tough economy that we're in at the moment. You know, we're all experiencing it, and when that happens, everyone kind of battens down the hatches. People are less willing to kind of take a risk, or as you say, move up. They just want to be a bit more cautious. So, is that something that's been so with your work through Property Developers Show and the podcast? Are you seeing that echoed with other developers that you're talking to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, probably 75% of the developers that I speak to that I know are very well established will probably echo what I've just said there, where it has been difficult. And a lot of people have sort of the famous word from COVID, pivoted their sort of strategies to suit the current market, which I know a lot of people that are doing like tenanted stock and sourcing that on and trading that and doing auction trading and just trying different ways to sort of generate sort of capital that isn't reliant on kind of that exit being a sale. And I know a lot of new build developers that are suffering from that sort of drag effect as well, that they've got stock that's, brand spanking new premium stock that they're really struggling to shift because there's just so much available on the market, as I've sort of mentioned, and kind of it's just really sort of a sticky market for those types of people. On the refinance side, a little bit different because, there's a bit more kind of flexibility in terms of valuations. But I know of people that, again, are getting down vows because surveyors, understandably, are very skeptical as to where the market is heading. And I think people's sort of price expectations are still where we went through that post-COVID boom. And I don't think that's realistic at the moment. I think if you're valuing at that, you're probably in negative equity at the moment. But I think certainly there's scope for, property prices haven't kept up with inflation and all that sort of stuff. So there's definitely scope for the property market to grow, but I just don't think it can with current interest rates, stamp duty, and just the general kind of confidence in the market at the moment.
Yeah, it's tough times, like a lot of uncertainty, and as you say, interest rates haven't helped. People who probably would have taken a big step up a few years ago when interest rates were really low, not willing to take on a massive mortgage right now when who knows what's going to be happening. I was interested to say to hear you say that, people are pivoting and doing things differently because actually adding value to a property and then selling it can be a really cost inefficient way of trading property. It's hugely capital intensive, takes a long time. We tie up a lot of money. And as you rightly said it just now, those holding costs, finance costs, all the other costs, insurance, the council tax, all of that stuff can really, really eat into a deal when that's going to take quite a long time to actually trade on. You're doing things a little differently now, and I thought this would be really interesting to kind of share with how have you pivoted? So how are you doing things differently now, and how do deals look now compared to that kind of more traditional buy for sell on model?
Yeah, so I think for me, I had a bit of a personal change in the sense of what I was looking to do from an investment strategy. And sort of post COVID, obviously prices went up, and I offloaded most of them, all of my HMO stock at the time, just because I didn't really enjoy the tenant process. I just thought there was more efficient ways to sort of have my cash working for me, which is why I sort of doubled down on the kind of flipping model and buy and sell model. But as part of that, I kind of realized that you need sort of quick wins in this market because, like you say, that the market is very slow. It's very difficult to operate in. Sort of 20, well, what would it be 2024. I had a relationship with the landlord for a very long time, came off the back of a leaflet, and back in, I don't know when that was, 22, somewhere like that, 21, 22. And I'd bought a few different bits, had a few creative strategies. I did a lease option with him, and he had this sort of problem property, if we call it that, really derelict. He had two tenants in there that were just, it was atrocious conditions, really. But he didn't have the sort of funds to refurb it or do anything. And he was too afraid to evict the tenants because he couldn't afford to lose the rent and obviously pay the council tax and everything else. So a really sort of troubling situation. Fortunately, the tenants finally moved out, and he sort of came to me and said, look, I need to offload this property quickly. How quickly can you buy this off me? And obviously I was sort of ready to act on that. So I ended up using cash and bridging finance. And I knew, particularly in the area that I was in, I could get a premium for it if I priced it well in an auction. So I think I bought it for 50 or 55. I can't remember off the top of my head now. Put it into auction. So that was November, I think that completed. I've got the completion statements, which I'm sure I'll be able to share as part of that. And I think we completed February. So I bought for 50, 55, can't remember, as I said. And we sold that for 93. And that kind of opened this kind of door for me to understand, right, okay, this is such a more efficient way to, I didn't spend any money on the property. I actually went to the property once when I bought it, and that's because somebody broke into it and smashed the door in, and obviously went upstairs and realized there was nothing up there of value. Tried to move a big TV and didn't manage to get that out of the house. So that was the only time that I went there, just to board, or I didn't, but a contractor boarded the door up, and then it went to auction, sold, and money in the bank within sort of 4 or 5 months. So it
And
was,
so literally no work done on this, just buy, straightforward purchase, and then
yeah,
back it into an auction.
yeah, pretty much. But I knew if I priced it well at the auction with a low reserve, it would it would get a lot of attention, particularly in the area that it was in. And the auction house that I used has sort of that kind of reputation of building a lot of momentum towards those types of properties, because people kind of think, oh, it's really cheap, I'm going to get a really good deal here. And then they get auction, jitters, and they get too
Auction
excited.
fever, yeah.
That's
Auction
it.
fever,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Not jitters, that's the opposite. And yeah, ended up sort of going up in increments of 500 from, I think, 60,000 to 93,000. It was the most painful auction I've ever watched, particularly because it was my lot. But as soon as it got to sort of 80, I was comfortable. Everything above that was kind of like, profit. Uh, it was a really good deal for that sort of quick in and out. And I know a lot of people that have also pivoted into that strategy because of that reason, that it's very quick in and out. There's kind of that momentum with it. You're not reliant too much on, people dragging it out for 3 months, 4 months trying to complete. It's auction trade, it's 28-day completion, or you lose your 10% deposit or you charged interest, whichever comes first.
Okay, so and is that the strategy now? So given where we are right now with this sort of uncertainty, is buying a straightforward purchase and then putting into auction the strategy now?
I think it is. It's very, there's a lot of sort of, I don't know if hype's the right word for it, but there's a lot of attention around it at the moment. And I think the market is sort of in a really good place for that, where you've got really motivated sellers that like need their money tomorrow. And you'll have that in any, market conditions, but it's really difficult now for them to offload it in a really fast paced way. Whereas if you've got the resources to buy that and turn that around very quickly, there's opportunity in that, particularly if it's maybe got a bit of a sticky situation, or, it's got a tenant in, or, stuff like that, it makes it difficult to sell in a traditional way. That's where those opportunities lie. And I think particularly with, the tax change, Section 24, and landlords looking to offload with the Renters' Right Bill and all this sort of stuff, there's a lot of opportunity out there for that type of stock to really get in there with the trade. Obviously, the trade for me, I had a relationship with that landlord, so that's something that I'd cultivated, and that's how I generated that lead. But I know a lot of people that are sort of targeting that specific type of house to use that strategy with.
Yeah. So in particular, potentially landlords who are exiting the market, who've got these properties that haven't been invested in over the years and are now, problem properties.
certainly.
Was there a reason that the vendor didn't look to auction this themselves?
I think just a peace of mind and ease that he didn't want to have to deal with an agent to go around and then potentially viewings and stuff like that. He just wanted peace of mind that, for him, it would have been probably a month or two to arrange an agent to go around to get it listed. Whereas for me to buy it, it was a phone call and it was like, yes, I'll have it straight into conveyancing, completed within, 4 or 5 weeks. So it was that sort of simplicity that he wanted and required, which that's kind of where that motivation sat with him.
Okay, and we interestingly we've done some interviews recently where people are doing a lot of these kind of projects, but on an assisted sale basis. So they're not even kind of buying the property necessarily to sell on. Is that something you've been looking at, or?
Not so much assisted sale. I'm very aware of the strategy. I think it's a great strategy and fits into that trading model perfectly. And I think when you're approaching deals, I think you've just got to listen to what the motivation of the seller is, and you've got to understand, okay, what have I got in terms of, how do I position this available where we can find a middle ground with this individual. Obviously, an assisted sale with the deal that I bought wouldn't have been suitable because he would have had to wait. But in a different scenario, it might have been that I underwrote that in the auction. So for people that aren't familiar with an underwrite, you essentially guarantee. So in this case, if you needed 55 or 55, we'll say, you underwrite the deal. So if it sells for 45, you have to buy it at 55. That's how the underwrite works. However, the upside of that is if it sells for 93, you might agree 50-50 with the vendor, or 75-25 in the vendor's favor. It's all negotiable. You would keep the uplift of that auction sale price. So anything between 55 and a 93, if you agreed 50-50, obviously you'd get 50% of that. It all depends on the auction house that you use. Some don't allow that, some do. Sometimes the auction house takes a cut as well. So you've just got to figure out, how the sort of how that fits. And then obviously you've got assisted sales, you've got overages, which is essentially you secure it at 100,000 and you sell it for 110 to another landlord or developer. So there's so many different ways to sort of skin the cat in the trading business, but it's having that kind of arsenal of, hey, let's listen to what the vendor's saying. Let's understand exactly what their motivation is, how quickly they need to move, what they're trying to gain from this, the transaction, and try and find that middle ground and win-win scenario for that landlord or vendor, or whoever it is.
And so, from your experience with Property Developers Show, are you seeing more developers kind of pivoting into more assured sales quickly? So, being able to exit a deal faster?
Yeah, I think it's generally kind of the ethos of the market, really. People moving to social housing for guaranteed rent, people moving into sort of safer and secure investments from a trading perspective. But, this is kind of the, I suppose, subject of this talk. But I do know people that are having success in different locations and environments. I mean, we run the show down in Bristol, which I know is incredibly buoyant down there, and there's a lot of activity, and people, kind of call it the countryside London, and lots of money going into Bristol, and PBSA, purpose built student accommodation, works really well in Bristol. And that it just kind of depends on where you are in sort of a location basis. I think particularly where I invest, it's very kind of owner occupier driven, and not so much you've got Crewe, which is a really good investment area. But outside of that, in Cheshire, it's not, it's all sort of owner occupier land. So, which is why the trading strategy kind of works well in Crewe, because there's more opportunity from a buy to let basis. But the flipping kind of model works really well in the other areas in Cheshire, because you get that kind of end user that's, again, in good economic times, willing to pay the premium for the stock. So I know sort of, well, the show is more orientated around people that are doing deals, and they might be doing buy, refurb, refinance and HMOs. And there is a lot of activity in the market for sure, and people having success. But I know a lot of people that maybe relied on certain strategies, a few years ago, have sort of felt the drag effect of not pivoting quick enough and seeing that the market's changing, which is essentially what happened to me. I just thought, I could continue to do that model, and then I've realized, actually, I've done that model probably to a point now where it doesn't work so well in the current market. Okay, let's look at different ways to skin the cat in this scenario. And I think that's kind of where I get that feedback. Yeah, it's been really difficult the last couple of years because of that lack of change, but people are still finding ways to make investments work in this market for sure.
Okay, so when you're selling on through auction, this this particular property, so tired, unloved, problem property, who's buying? So who's your end buyer? Is that someone who's going to take this on as an investment property, or someone who's going to move in and do the work themselves and live in it?
Yeah, usually it's an investor that is sort of coming in and buying it. I remember when I sold the auction flip that I mentioned, and I had again a good relationship with the agent. I was viewing another property, and he said, "Look, the guys that are buying your property phoned me and said, how on earth has he bought that property for the rate that he has?" And it was kind of like a bit of a sort of laughing moment type thing. And as that he was telling me what their plan is to keep it was two flats basically, so their plan was to keep it as two flats and convert it and this, that and the other. And yeah, it's typically it's the investors that would would say that sort of thing for sure, like how on earth did that happen. An owner occupier probably wouldn't even bat an eyelid on that, but yeah, it is that type of investor that kind of is buying that stock for sure.
Okay, so perhaps a kind of slightly less sophisticated investor, people who've not been kind of developing the relationships that you have over the years, because this has got a long tail on this deal with you working with that landlord on a number of properties.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think they were London-based investors, and 93,000 to them it's all relative to what they're used to. So, and I know particularly from a long-term perspective, it was a really unique property because it was two flats. So I know from a long-term perspective, it will pay dividends for them because of that sort of dual income and great spot, everything else that sort of comes with that. And I think all you need is two people that are interested in that buying that deal for it to obviously get to the price that it was. It wouldn't have been a deal for me at 93,000. Probably would have just about been a deal, maybe 75, 80 if I was to do the work myself on a good day. But people, with, a lot of liquidity and a lot of cash, they're just happy to buy something that they can see from a long-term perspective that it's always going to go up in price. It's always going to generate income, in this case, dual income. So it was a good deal, depending on where you're at in terms of your property journey, I suppose.
Yeah, so if you're happy to leave a lot more money in the deal and just sit on it or whatever, then it's a good deal for them, but not necessarily a great
Absolutely.
deal for you at that price.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I'm on the ground, I've got the relationships. I know where my sort of price points are, but which is why, as an industry, there's no kind of competitiveness. It's all, collaborative. It's because what works for me probably doesn't work for you, and what works for you probably doesn't work for the next person. And that's the beauty of property. It's just figuring out what works for you and going after that type of deal.
So what's next with the property developer show and podcast then? So what's your next plan with that?
Absolutely. So the Property Developer Show, the podcast, we're just continuing to sort of do a new episode every week of brilliant guests that are out there doing it, speaking the truth. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And that for me, it's not about how many followers you got. It's about how experienced you are. So that's all going really well.
Yeah, and
Really happy
how
with that.
authentic it is. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we'll keep doing that, keep putting out the episodes. Then the actual show, we've got Manchester left this year on the 10th of September. We've sold all sort of the exhibition space with that, so it's going to be a really busy event. And then we're in Leeds on the 8th of October for, again, another hopefully brilliant event. And then next year we'll be I think in this order, Manchester, Bristol, Birmingham, London and Leeds. So we'll be adding London to the list, and awards as well to celebrate some of the great businesses that we work with.
Hey, amazing. So tell me a bit about the logistics of setting up exhibitions around the UK. It's not for the faint-hearted.
No, definitely not. I mean, I'm a property person before I'm an events person, and I kind of approached this business as I would want the event myself as a developer, and what sort of vendors you want there in terms of exhibitors and speakers and how we format the day. And yeah, I've had to sort of learn as I go fortunately now I've got a bit of a team around me that can help sort of organize the day and, bring that kind of professionalism, which I probably lacked to begin with, particularly talking to venues who probably deal with, these types of events all the time.
Well, it takes an enormous amount of enthusiasm and energy and drive to make this thing happen, but that's
Absolutely.
not necessarily what makes it look professional and really well organized, is it?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I've got the kind of vision, the team's got the implementation, and we really focus on just driving that value piece. That is the most important thing to me. It's the value that the show provides. Everything else is a bit of a byproduct, and that is the sole purpose. And I think the show has grown so quickly. I think because that has been the focus. It's been that kind of collaborative environment where people are learning, connecting, and I know of huge amount of business that's been done because of the show and opportunities and doors that have been opened for people that have been a part of that, and that's what makes all the hard work and all the traveling and down to Bristol and up to Leeds and Birmingham and here, there, and everywhere, and putting the effort in. That's what really kind of makes me excited. And to be honest with you, it suits my personality down to a T. Really, just that kind of buzz and making sure people are happy at the event and seeing the event come together. I just absolutely love the show and everything about it. So I really landed on my feet with this one for sure.
And so, how does the balance look these days between property investor and landlord, trading properties, podcasts, and physical show? How does that look for you these days?
I think generally, and I think I call this the entrepreneur's curse. I feel like I could be doing more. And I think that's just a natural feeling that everyone gets, no matter how busy you are. But I find the balance really, really well in terms of kind of spinning everything at once. And again, that helps with having a team to offload a lot of the stuff that kind of goes on in the background and dealing with the sort of logistics side. But I think generally, I spend most of my time now focused on growing the show and making sure that we deliver successful events because we've got a lot of stakeholders now that rely on the show's success. And then property's always been a constant in my life. It's always been kind of there. Started as an apprentice, and well, if people want to go back and find the article, there's a bit of story on what my background was, and that's always been like, no matter what's happened, had the finance brokerage, I'm doing the show, but the property kind of investing is like the constant, the side hustle, I'm sure people would probably call it.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's not, property investing or even flipping properties. It's rarely a full-time job, is it? It can be periods of intense work, but it's not sat there doing the 9 to 5, 48 weeks of the year to do 2 or 3 deals in a year, realistically, is it? So I guess it gives you this time and freedom to pursue something which is more of a passion project and something you really believe in and adding value to the community.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's just so happens that it's also a business at the same time, but it is absolutely a passion project for sure. It's something that, yeah, I love doing. I've loved to see it evolve. I feel blessed to be a part of this journey that I'm on with the show, and it's become way bigger than me. Which is, I think, if you go back to the interview that I had, was it Raj? I think might have interviewed me, and he was like, why are you doing this? And I said to him on that interview, I want to create something that's bigger than me, and I feel like I'm managing to achieve that through the show for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it sounds like genuinely creating a legacy there as well. As you say, it will become bigger than has become bigger than an entity in its own right. So it's been amazing catching up to seeing, the journey along the way from where you were kind of 4 years ago and to talk, for you to speak really candidly about some of the real challenges that are out there. And it's amazing to see that you're still finding opportunities out there. And we genuinely believe it. YPN, as you know, the same ethos that it doesn't really matter what's going on in the property market. There is always a way, you know, challenges present opportunities. They're not always obvious. And so it's our job to share that with things like Property Developer Show and YPM Magazine and membership to showcase that actually, you know, things can work in the current market and we just need to pivot and adapt and change. So it's been really great talking to you and hearing you speak so candidly, and we're really excited to see what you do next.
I appreciate that. And well, let's give it another 5 years and see where we're at. Probably less hair or grayer hair and
Where the grey hair happens, I'm afraid. Yeah, absolutely.
great stuff. But yeah, no, it's been a pleasure to catch up, and I really appreciate having me on again.
Learn from people who've been there and done it. Real investors, real lessons. ypn.plus.